Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go.
I, 29-year-old male, have been working nonstop for the past 2 weeks at our company's branch office in another city. The project was intense with endless meetings and tight deadlines. Finally, everything was wrapped up and I could head back home. I specifically booked a window seat for my 70-minute flight because I wanted to relax and maybe catch a quick nap while leaning against the window, something I always do on flights. When I reached my seat, I found a young boy, probably around 7 years old, sitting in my window seat. His father, who looked to be in his 50s, was in the aisle seat. Across from them, in the other row, it was a 2-2 seating arrangement, sat who I assumed were the boy's mother and sister. I gestured to my seat and the father looked up at me. He asked if I would mind swapping seats with them, explaining they had a seat in the row behind and that it would mean a lot if they could sit together. I asked if it was a window seat, to which he replied no, it was an aisle seat. I then told him I'd have to decline, explaining that I had specifically booked the window seat. The father's expression changed from hopeful to annoyed. He asked if I was willing to sit next to his son, his tone becoming increasingly hostile. I responded that I didn't care who I sat next to, I just wanted my window seat. The father stood up roughly, pulling his son up from the seat, and made a sarcastic comment about me being a very nice person, quickly correcting himself to say I wasn't a very nice person at all. I told him it was none of his business and asked him to be polite. He responded defiantly, stating he wasn't being polite. I told him he should learn to behave himself. I maintained eye contact with him, keeping my expression serious. I could tell he was trying to shame me in front of other passengers, but I wasn't going to back down. His wife watched the entire exchange from across the aisle, shooting disapproving looks my way. Just then, a flight attendant who had noticed the commotion approached us. She asked if everything was all right. The father complained that I wouldn't swap seats so they could sit together as a family. The flight attendant explained to him that if they hadn't reserved specific seats together, they couldn't force other passengers to give up their reserved seats, but offered to check if there were any other arrangements possible. The flight attendant's intervention seemed to deflate the father's attitude somewhat. A passenger from the row behind offered to swap their seat, which meant the family could sit together after all. But the father's demeanor remained sour throughout the flight. When we were deplaning, I overheard the flight attendant telling another crew member that the family actually had the option to book seats together when they made their reservation, but they had chosen the basic fare without seat selection to save money. The mother, who was walking past just then, overheard this and turned red with embarrassment. Their attempt to guilt-trip me into giving up my seat had backfired, exposing their own poor planning to everyone within earshot. What made the situation even more satisfying was what happened at baggage claim. As I waited for my suitcase, I noticed the same family arguing with ground staff about their luggage. Apparently, they hadn't paid for checked bags in advance either, and were now complaining about the higher at-airport fee. Several passengers from our flight who had witnessed the earlier seat drama were rolling their eyes at the scene. One elderly passenger near me muttered something about how some people never learn to plan ahead. The father caught sight of me watching and quickly turned away, his earlier bravado completely gone. His wife was frantically searching through her phone, probably looking for their booking confirmation, while their children looked increasingly tired and frustrated. The ground staff remained professional but firm about the baggage fees, just as the flight attendant had been about the seating arrangement. I collected my carry-on and walked out of the airport, feeling vindicated. During my cab ride home, I received an email from the airline thanking me for being a loyal customer and awarding me extra miles for my patience during the flight. It turned out that another passenger had commended me for handling the situation, and the flight attendant had submitted a positive report about the incident. If sitting together was so important to them, they should have paid for seat selection like everyone else. Their lack of planning wasn't my emergency, and no amount of public shaming was going to change that fact. My mom passed away when I was 4, leaving my dad to raise me alone. He worked 2 jobs, as a janitor during the day and a gas station attendant at night just to keep food on our table. We lived in a small apartment on the wrong side of an affluent coastal town, where most people owned boats and vacation homes. Despite our financial situation, my dad always made sure I had what I needed, even if it wasn't brand new or fancy. He taught me the value of hard work and being grateful for what we had. But kids can be cruel, especially when you're the only one wearing thrift store clothes in a school full of designer brands. There was this playground near the marina where I loved to spend my afternoons while waiting for my dad to finish his first shift. It had the perfect view of the ocean, and the sea breeze made even the hottest days bearable. That's where I first encountered Karen and her two kids. Karen was married to some big-shot lawyer in town, and everyone knew their family. They owned the biggest yacht in the marina, a gleaming white monster that probably cost more than what my dad would make in 10 lifetimes. Her kids were just like her, entitled, mean, and always looking down on others. One hot summer afternoon when I was 11, I was sitting on my favorite swing, watching the boats bob up and down in the water. Karen's kids were playing with their expensive remote-control boats in the small pond next to the playground. From her beach chair, Karen started yelling at me to get off the swing because her kids wanted to use it. When I pointed out that there were 3 other empty swings available, she claimed they were broken. I knew she was lying since I'd just seen her kids using those swings earlier. Karen then started threatening me, asking if I knew who she was. I replied that I didn't know her, but I had been there first. That's when her kids decided to join in. The older kid approached me first, calling me poor girl and telling me to move because their mom said so. The younger one chimed in, saying the playground belonged to them and that people like me didn't belong there. I remembered my dad's advice about standing up for myself and decided to stand my ground. That turned out to be a mistake. Before I knew what was happening, they both pushed me off the swing. I fell hard on the gravel, scraping my knees and elbows badly. Karen just laughed from her chair, making cruel comments about how this is what happens when trash doesn't know its place. I started crying more from humiliation than pain. A couple of other parents were watching, but they all turned away. Everyone knew Karen's husband could make life difficult for anyone who crossed them. My dad found me still crying on a bench near the marina an hour later. When he saw my injuries, he was furious. We went to the police station, but nothing came of it. The officer just happened to be Karen's husband's golf buddy. They dismissed it as just kids being kids and suggested that maybe I shouldn't play in that playground if I couldn't handle rough play. 2 weeks later, something strange happened. There was a huge commotion at the marina. Karen's precious yacht had somehow sunk overnight. The insurance company called it a freak accident, something about the boat taking on water through an uncapped intake valve. Karen was hysterical, screaming at everyone and claiming sabotage, but there was no evidence of foul play. My uncle, who worked as a boat mechanic in the next town over, helped with the salvage operation. He looked pretty satisfied with himself during the whole thing, but I never thought anything of it at the time. Fast forward 20 years. I'm married now, living in a different state, working as a successful software engineer. During a family dinner last Christmas, my dad had a bit too much wine and started reminiscing about the old days. My dad brought up the topic of that awful woman whose boat sank. When I mentioned Karen, he started chuckling and revealed how angry my uncle had been when he saw what they did to me that day. Confused, I asked what he meant. That's when my dad explained how my uncle had volunteered for the salvage operation to ensure nobody found the real reason the boat sank. He told me how my uncle had secretly gone out in his small fishing boat the night before, used his knowledge as a boat mechanic to tamper with a few key systems, and made it look like an accident. The insurance company paid out less than half of what the boat was worth because they found evidence of poor maintenance. My dad then told me with satisfaction how Karen's husband had to sell their beach house to buy a new boat, and they moved away a year later when his law firm went bankrupt. He said that karma has a way of catching up. I sat there stunned, as my dad winked at me and poured himself another glass of wine. My uncle, who was sitting across the table, just smiled and changed the subject. To this day, every time I see a fancy yacht, I think about my uncle and how he served justice in his own quiet way. Karen never knew it was him. She probably still tells people about her mysterious boat accident, playing the victim as always. But somewhere out there, my uncle is probably still smiling about his perfect crime. I've been living in the United States for about 8 years now, working as a doctor at the local hospital. Back in Mexico, where I grew up, my father taught me everything about maintaining a house. He always said that a real man should know how to fix what he owns. Those words stuck with me, and even though I became a doctor, I never lost my love for hands-on work. When I first moved here, some of my colleagues questioned why a doctor would want to do their own yard work or home repairs. They suggested I should hire someone to do these things, saying I could afford it with my salary. But that's not how I was raised. There's something satisfying about working with your hands and seeing the immediate results of your labor. I bought my house 3 years ago. It's a beautiful place in a nice neighborhood on the East Coast, though some of my neighbors still seem surprised to see a Mexican man owning property here. I've gotten used to the occasional strange looks, but I never expected what happened last summer. It was a scorching hot day, and I had taken the day off to clear out my yard. The weeds had gotten a bit out of control while I was pulling extra shifts at the hospital. I was wearing a sleeveless undershirt because of the heat, covered in sweat and dirt from the work, when this woman pulled up in her luxury SUV. She rolled down her window and looked at me like she was evaluating a piece of furniture. In a condescending tone, she asked me how much I charged for my services. The assumption was clear. She thought I was a hired help, probably because of how I looked and what I was wearing. I could have gotten angry, but I decided to have some fun instead. With a smile, I told her that I offered my services for free. I paused for dramatic effect, watching her face light up at the prospect of free labor. Then I added that the lady of the house lets me sleep with her anytime I want. Her eyes widened as she processed what I just said. Then she looked at my house, my very nice house, and must have realized her mistake. Her face turned about 3 different shades of red in rapid succession. She didn't say another word, just rolled up her window and drove off so fast she nearly hit my mailbox. A few days later, when I was getting my mail, I saw her walking with another woman, probably gossiping about the neighborhood. When she spotted me, she practically dragged her friend across the street to avoid passing by my house. Her friend looked confused, but Karen was too embarrassed to explain why they were suddenly crossing the street. Now, whenever I'm doing yard work, I make sure to wear my sleeveless shirts. It's become a sort of inside joke with my wife. She thinks it's hilarious that some people still make these assumptions, especially since she's the one who actually needs help with the DIY stuff around the house. I still see Karen around the neighborhood sometimes. She always avoids eye contact and hurries past our house. I guess she learned an important lesson about making assumptions, though I doubt she'll ever admit it. My wife suggested we should invite her over for dinner sometime just to mess with her, but I think the poor woman has suffered enough embarrassment for one lifetime. The funny thing is, a few of our other neighbors who witnessed the interaction have become good friends since then. They often stop by to chat when I'm working in the yard, and we've even started a neighborhood tool-sharing group. Last month, there was a neighborhood emergency when a water main broke during a storm. Several basements were flooding, including Karen's. I heard about it through our neighborhood group chat and went around offering help with emergency pumps and water damage control. When I got to Karen's house, she stood in her doorway looking absolutely mortified. Her basement was taking on water fast, but she couldn't bring herself to ask for my help. Fortunately, her teenage son had more sense than his mother. He practically begged me to help them save their family photos and other irreplaceable items stored in the basement. I spent 2 hours helping them, and Karen couldn't even look me in the eye the entire time. Her son kept thanking me profusely, completely unaware of the previous incident. When I was leaving, Karen finally managed to mumble a quiet thank you. I just smiled and told her that's what neighbors do for each other. At least now everyone knows better than to assume the guy in the sleeveless shirt is just the hired help. I met my ex-husband during my second year of college. He was this charismatic business major who seemed to have everything figured out. We dated for 2 years before getting married, and at first, everything was perfect. He landed a great job right after graduation, and I was working part-time while finishing my degree. The problems started subtly. At first, it was small things. He'd forget to pay the electricity bill, miss his dentist appointments, or forget his mother's birthday. Being the supportive wife I was, I stepped in to help. I'd always tell him not to worry, that I'd take care of it. Before I knew it, I was handling everything: bills, appointments, scheduling, shopping, housework, and even buying presents for his family. Once, when I was particularly overwhelmed with work, I asked him to schedule his own dental cleaning. He brushed off my request, saying I was better at organizing these things, and reminded me that he was the one bringing in most of the money. That was his go-to response for everything. He earned money, so apparently that exempted him from all other adult responsibilities. Even after we had 3 kids, nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. When I asked him to attend at least one of the kids' parent-teacher conferences, he claimed he was too busy with work and just told me to fill him in later. After 17 years of marriage, I was exhausted. I wasn't just a wife and mother. I was his personal assistant, secretary, and life manager. The breaking point came when I found myself writing an apology email to his boss because he'd forgotten about an important client meeting, and I hadn't reminded him. When I finally confronted him about it, telling him I couldn't keep managing his entire life anymore, he dismissed my concerns. He claimed our system worked perfectly fine. I had to explain to him that it only worked perfectly fine for him, not for me. That's when I told him I was done. The divorce was messy, but I got through it. I got full custody of the kids, and he seemed perfectly fine with that arrangement. He paid his child support regularly, I'll give him that much. But he barely saw the kids, always too busy with work, vacations, or whatever excuse he could come up with. 5 years passed, and I had built a good life for myself and the kids. Then, out of nowhere, my phone started blowing up with calls from him. He demanded that I call the insurance company right away, claiming they wouldn't remove me unless I called them myself. When I asked why this was suddenly urgent after 5 years, he just got more aggressive, saying I was creating problems for him. After a week of his daily harassment, I finally called Progressive Insurance, mostly to shut him up. The conversation was enlightening. The agent told me there was no record of him ever trying to remove me, contrary to what he'd claimed. When she asked me how long it had been since I lived at that address, I told her it had been 5 years. She then explained with obvious amusement that changing his status from married to single would raise his rates considerably, especially since it should technically be backdated. When she asked if I was sure he wanted to do this, I couldn't help but confirm that yes, he'd been very insistent about it. 2 weeks later, I had to call him about our son's medical insurance issues. He immediately started complaining about how expensive everything had become, mentioning the huge bill from the insurance company. He went on about his new car and a burst pipe in the kitchen, praising his new girlfriend, who was living with him rent-free, for helping with the repairs. I barely listened to his complaints, instead focusing on getting him to deal with United Healthcare about our son's surgery. Now it all made sense. The new girlfriend had probably seen my name on the insurance documents and wasn't too happy about it. That's why, after 5 years, it suddenly became urgent to remove me. This man made over $120,000 a year, paid $20,000 in child support for 3 kids he never saw, and was whining about insurance rates while buying new cars and going on vacations. The fact that his attempt to appease his new girlfriend by removing me from his insurance ended up costing him a small fortune was just perfect karma. A friend who works in insurance told me that backdating the policy change on a brand new car for someone under 40 would likely cost him thousands in additional premiums. I hope he enjoyed explaining that bill to his new girlfriend. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.